All right, so welcome to the Women in Cyber podcast series. I'm your host, Lorene Smith, and I'm the Global Vice President of Strategic Alliances at Excellion. And I'm really happy to be here virtually, of course, with Zahira Gonzalvo, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at Flagstar Bank. And you're located in Troy, Michigan, and I'm here in San Francisco. So welcome, Zahira. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Flagstar Bank? There are probably some listeners who don't know about the bank.
Thank you for having me, Lorene. Happy to be here. Yes, Flagstar Bank is a mid-sized bank, 27 billion in assets, located in Troy, Michigan. We are a top 3 savings banks for the nation, and we are a top 5 mortgage originator as well. We have around 150 branches in Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Indiana. That's who we are.
Okay, sounds good. So I know that so for those listeners who don't know, Zahira was on a panel that I moderated about, a couple weeks ago, a cybersecurity panel. And the topic was the security impact of the coronavirus, which was obviously and still is on everybody's mind. A lot has changed in the last 3 months since we've gone on lockdown. So maybe you can share with us, how things are going for you now. And I know that, we've talked about this very sensitive and important topic around the protests around George Floyd and everything else that's around the inequality and racism going on. So talk to me a little bit about that. Talk to our listeners about that, and how the bank is reacting to that.
Yeah, so from a pandemic perspective, as we had talked about before, we were quick to send people home, and we have the infrastructure to be able to do that in a quickly manner. That worked really well. Our business continuity plans really worked as we intended it to be. Now we are preparing on how to face the return from home approach. And then, yes, these are difficult times that we're living in. The bank has been outspoken to our employee base about how we feel about racism and inequalities. We have a diversity and inclusion program, and we have one of our groups is the African American group. We've had set up some panels. It's important for our employees to express how they're feeling during these times. It's important for us as an organization to have a commitment against those important issues and against racism and inequalities, and also help our communities where we serve and also our internal workforce manage through that and being able to express how they're feeling. And also to start building the pipeline of diversity within the organization and make sure that it's not only talk, but also action as well.
No, that is so important. Talk, not action. I mean, action and not so much talk. I mean, that's what I'm seeing too. And, Kim Hakem from FutureCon and I were talking the other day, and she made an announcement about being in the Navy and 10 years ago. And she was in a very diverse group, and she just was talking about how she hopes that carries through. And I was saying the same thing. It's like we just need to address the inequality, and I think it's about knowledge and about listening and taking action. So that's great. I'm glad to hear the bank is focused on that. So switching into, this whole podcast, the Women in Cyber podcast series is all about creating a mentorship platform for women in cyber, for those getting into this field, and also women in the field and want to move up the ranks. And so I'm interested, and hopefully our listeners are interested too, how did you get your start in cybersecurity?
So there are many aspects of cybersecurity, and I started in the technology risk side of cybersecurity, even from when I graduated from college some years ago. That's how I started in the technology audit side and technology risk side of the house. And then moving into different aspects of technology, and then going into a risk organization and having oversight over cyber risk. And so it's important that it's not only the technical aspect of cyber, but also the risk aspect of cyber and how we translate that into the board, into our senior leaders, so we can get support into our initiatives and be more effective. So that's how I started. It was in the risk side, and just a year and a half ago, I moved into the actual chief information security and privacy role.
Okay. And how long have you actually been in this field in general in cyber?
Between all of the years in technology, I would say around 20, between 18 and 20 years.
Okay. Yeah. So I know that things have changed. I mean, the chief information security officer role wasn't even a role probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And so how have you seen this industry change over the last, 10 years and where you are now?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So before, there were some components of protection that have always been there, but they were more on the technology operations or technology engineering side of the house. And even when you saw the shift of splitting that between a technology and a security organization, the security roles were very technical in nature. They were either on the protection side or on the operation side of the house. And I think the shift that I've seen in the last 10 years is going into more of a risk understanding and a business focus, and how the cyber risk is important for the overall strategy of the business. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as we see organizational hierarchies changing, even from a reporting standpoint, where before the CISO used to report, or the security manager used to report to a CIO. You're seeing them now in a lot of cases, and that's true in banking, where they're shifting to reporting to a chief risk officer or a higher level executive in the organization. And we're going to continue seeing that in the future as well.
Yeah, I've heard that even the pandemic really shifted that focus as well, to being the CISO being a true leader in how to respond to the pandemic. And I think that, that shift that you're talking about just really kind of catapulted into this, having a seat at the table and being a leader. One of the people in the bank that I've talked to a couple months ago said that she's actually kind of heading up the task force now on the pandemic. And the entire executive team was following suit, looking to her. So, are you finding that now that that you're having, like you were saying, you're reporting to a higher level person at the organization now, and you're having more conversations at the board table in the meetings, and to report on risk and security?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of things with the pandemic. It's same thing. A lot of the CISOs, and that was true in my case, we own the business continuity process for the company. So as the pandemic came in, absolutely, we had the seat at the table, trying to coordinate the crisis teams, etc. And so that gave us that visibility and sit with the executives to be consulted on what to do in terms of action, also in coordination with the enterprise risk organizations as well. So yes, I've seen that. The other aspect of it, more on even before the pandemic came in, you see a lot of companies, and true again for us, where at the board level, they're forming technology committees, where the board focuses not only on typical risk or more enterprise risk, but also technology risk. And so the CISO, the same with the CIO, are part of that conversation directly with the board. And they know what the risk is, and sometimes they have trouble translating that into a business language, and that's the role of the CISO now. We need to be able to translate that technology risk into a business language so they can understand and help us.
Right. Yeah, I've heard a lot about, and actually I'm going to be interviewing somebody soon that wrote a book called The Business-Minded CISO. And it's all about, putting risk plans together in a business-minded way. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, expanding a little bit on that, because, CISOs come in and a lot of times, especially in the past, it's no, you can't do this, user, you can't do this, we've got to secure, and you're in a complete, you're balancing from a complete lockdown situation to being able to run the business at the speed of business. So how do you balance that and communicate that to your
Yeah.
executives?
Yeah, we still had, and I think even with my colleagues that I've talked in the industry, they're seeing that we had to make some concessions, and the primary focus of the business is to continue to be profitable and continue operations, especially during this time. So we also have to keep that in mind. We have to do it in a secure manner, absolutely, but we do have to have processes in place to whether it is have an exception process where we are taking calculated risk and the business know what is the risk that they're taking in not following a policy during this time. And then we have to help them understand what is the risk so they can make the proper determination of, yeah, we're going ahead without following that policy for a period of time, or now that's really critical for us. We will adjust and do business in a different way. That's how we need to help them, and that's how we've been able to manage through this.
That's good. Let's talk about these cyber attacks, and I know we covered this on the panel, so I know it's it's fresh in your mind, and it probably is every day. But what cyber attacks have you seen on the increase since the pandemic, and how have you addressed them with your security team and the rest of the staff of the bank?
Yeah, phishing attacks is the number one. They continue to be the number one cyber attack and indicator of compromise that we see. We have email protection systems that are filtering through that data, but it only takes one to put us at risk. So awareness and training and phishing simulations during this pandemic are really critical. I've also seen an increase in scareware and extortion type of attempts. So that's also something that is coming through our email system that we are monitoring. And then on our online banking, and not only for us, but for all the banks that I've talked to, we've seen an increase on credential stuffing attacks as well. So those are kind of like the critical ones that we are seeing and monitoring right now.
Okay. And what have you seen? I'm just curious over your career. What's the most interesting or critical attack that you've or issue that you've encountered in cyber? And you don't really necessarily need to name names to incriminate anybody or any institution. But what have you found is the most intriguing and maybe the most challenging that happened to you in your organization, and how did you address it?
Well, definitely cyber fraud, social engineering. It's really difficult to tackle because there is a human element to it. And you need to be able, the people that is in our side handling that social engineering need to be very well trained, very well versed. And when that doesn't necessarily happen, you have cases of fraud that could happen. And we've seen in the past those cases. We've been able to contain them and increase our awareness, but certainly I've seen some social engineering that translate into big frauds, wire frauds, business email compromise type of attacks that could become pretty big. And that's the importance of not only, it's the importance of not only having a good training program, but also having cyber insurance. I think is also critical and important. And sometimes we don't talk enough about it, but also having those cyber insurance and having breach coaches and that type of thing, it's important to have as well.
And what about insider risk or insider threat? Oftentimes it's referred to as insider threat, but one of the CISOs that I talked to recently said, well, it's actually really insider risk because a lot of times, insiders aren't necessarily intentional. It's unintentional. So how do you address that? What are your thoughts on that area?
Yeah, that's with the pandemic, we've seen a lot of the insider risk when it's not intentional and people trying to bypass our data protections as well. So yes, it's policy, it's training, but it's also automated controls that you need to have to prevent leakage of data out of the organization and have proper monitoring so you can be alerted when something like that happens. We've seen insider threat also malicious, especially on the banking side of the house. That's when you have an area that where it's more liquid and there is cash involved, you see quite often that type of fraud as well from an insider perspective. And again, the importance is to have proper monitoring tools, user behavior, analytics tools that can tell you that there is a suspicious of something malicious going on.
And do you use artificial intelligence in terms of these automated alerts and things like that to monitor that situation?
So we use an MSSP. We use a third party that is doing monitoring for us 24/7, and they do have artificial intelligence for detection and response as well. So in that case, it's not internal to us, but it's through the third party that we use.
Okay. And I know I didn't really put this on our list as we were preparing for this, but what are your thoughts on zero trust?
Well, I think
it's a big topic, I know.
It's a big topic nowadays, and also I think not everybody is in the same spectrum when it comes to zero trust. I think there is a learning curve on this. I think there are automation and different third parties that are having different solutions to address this. And in some cases, we even have fatigue of the topic because it's spoken about it so much. But it's something that it's in the maturity curve of every cybersecurity program, something that we need to try to achieve because it's the only way that we're going to start mitigating some of the vulnerabilities in the environments that otherwise we're not going to be able to remediate.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. So let's shift gears a little bit and start talking about continue talking about your career, and tell me about what's worked for you as you know individual person, but in this cyber career, what has worked for you as you've advanced through your career? I want your secret sauce.
Well, there's not much secret sauce other than I think sometimes people come and when I'm mentoring somebody, I try to tell them this. People coming with the idea that they're going to be here for a year or two and quickly they're thinking about the next step. And I feel and I think and I'm of the belief that you're there for a reason. You need to focus on your work. And if you do your work with ethics and really well, people are going to notice and the opportunities are going to come. So instead of focusing on the future, yes, you need to have goals, but instead of always focusing on the future, you should focus on the day-to-day and do a good job as well. For me also, what has worked is having good mentors and sponsors, and they're different to me. A mentor is somebody that could be outside the company. It could be a friend, it could be a past supervisor that knows the good and the bad about you and that is willing to give you honest feedback all the time. Where a sponsor is somebody that is somebody that is inside the organization, that is going to be behind doors making decisions about your career. And therefore, those people are going to be the decision makers about what happened behind doors with other executives and trying to determine what will be your future in the company. So it's always to have a good sponsor, somebody that can bring you through that path inside the company, and also a mentor from an outside as well.
That's actually really,
to have both, a mentor and a sponsor. Yeah,
that's really good advice. And you know, when you're talking about mentor and having somebody or focusing on the things that are right in front of you and do them really well. I have 2 adult daughters, and I'm constantly telling them, just don't. I mean, I always tell them, you know, think you can accomplish anything. Focus on the stars, not the horizon. But I do tell them to do the little tasks really well. and those, they start to add up, right? Always have goals, but do things really well, and you get noticed. And then 20 years ago, or maybe more than 20 years ago, I had somebody in Ernst and Young that I took on as, he took me on as a sponsor, basically. He was my sponsor. I really didn't know that terminology then, but I remember looking at people in this particular group at Ernst and Young, and I said, I want to be in that group. I want to do what they do. And so I found the guy that was head of it, and then I said, look, I want to do this. And he said, okay. So he took me under his wing, and he basically was my sponsor and really launched me into technology career.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then the other thing is, if you're in a place where you're not happy and you're reporting to an insecure manager, and actually this insecure manager term was given to me by one of my sponsors at the bank. If you're reporting to an insecure manager and you're not going anywhere else under that manager, and you're not happy, and you wake up every morning and you say, oh my goodness, I don't want to go to the office, or I don't want to do this and have to deal with this. And sometimes those things happen through our heads, but if you are continuously for months and months feeling that way, then you got to leave. Then that's the time for you to decide, this is not the place for me to be. And then you have to make decisions and move out, because at the end of the day, it's your life. And if you're not happy in a place, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, that's really true. I think having that support system and feeling confident in what you're doing, and having somebody, a boss that supports you, really makes a big difference in you being successful. Mm-hmm. I've experienced that as well. So what roadblocks have you come across in your career as a woman? And, I like these women in cyber interviews to focus on cyber and just the challenges in general, but obviously it's around women. And so I think it's important for those listening to understand where the roadblocks have been and are, and how you overcame those.
Yeah, for me, there are two roadblocks, I think. I mean, not only being a woman, and as you know, you're a woman, it's the perhaps being talked condescendingly, or maybe people think that you're not technical enough, or you don't understand the business enough, or, you don't do it as well as a man could probably do it. That at some point in time may have happened to all of us. But I also have to overcome another roadblock, and it's my accent. Being a Latin woman, and not only being a Latin woman and having that label, but also it's not only having the Latin woman label, but also the accent. People may think sometimes, oh, she doesn't think as well, or she's not smart enough because I cannot understand her as well. And so that has been a roadblock for me in my career. And as my kids say, even if I try by now to change my accent, I can't. This is my accent. I cannot do anything about it. I'm going to pronounce the words the way that I'm pronouncing them right now. But that's a challenge. And I think it's not only for women, but for any minority and any immigrant to this country that have maybe some roadblock that they will need to overcome.
Yeah, interesting. Very well said, and I appreciate that that honesty. So, what would you say to? And we've touched a little bit on this as well already, but just specifically, if somebody came up to you and you had a couple minutes at a Starbucks or something, someplace like that. Now that we really can't go there anymore, at least in San Francisco, we can't at the moment. But what advice would you give a woman who comes up and asks you, "I really want to get into cybersecurity"? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I that building that pipeline of women into cyber, it's the goal, right? So absolutely, I think they need to find that sponsor to get them in. I think it's not only the studies, obviously, having to prepare yourself, also having to prepare yourself for rejection, and sometimes cybersecurity is not going to be your first step. Maybe you're going to have to go into risk, or into technology, or into something else, and then jump into cybersecurity. And I will tell them not to give up and continue trying. But belong to associations and women in cybersecurity organizations that can help you connect and network with people that are already in that field that can open doors for you. I think that's critical. If you are in college, definitely belong to student associations that can get you, professional associations that can get you to open doors into a company that you want to work in or into a field that you want to go to as well. I think that's critical. And that helped me when I graduated from college as well. So that would be one of my advices that I would give.
Okay. Yeah, and I think now there's cybersecurity programs that exist that probably didn't exist, even probably 5, 10 years
Yeah.
ago. I spoke to somebody who's a CISO in New York City, and his daughter is just graduating college, and she's in a 2-year she just graduated high school, and she's in a 2-year cybersecurity program. And it was interesting. I hadn't heard that there's programs like that. So do you know of cybersecurity programs like that?
Yeah, in Michigan, there are a couple. In fact, I have an intern right now that is doing a cybersecurity program. So I think we're seeing them more. And obviously, internships is a good way to get in. That's always something that will help in your career. Now, if you're an adult outside college already and you've been in your career for a long time, and you want to move into cybersecurity, then you may have additional roadblocks to go through, but just don't give up and try to connect with the right people.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have the cyber program or technology. I didn't think I was going to go into cyber. In fact, I have a maternal and child health degree from UC Berkeley. And many, many years ago, I went into healthcare, and then I ended up meeting somebody who was in tech, and I thought, wow, I have to get into that. And I was already out of college for 3 years, and I petitioned to get into the training program. It was a 3-month training program where they sent us to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I was from California. I'd never been to Wisconsin before, and I got accepted. And so I myself, with 25 other students, basically they had just graduated college, and me went off to this training program. So I second that, what you said. Don't give up and look for the opportunities for sure. It really changed. It changed my career path. I mean, so I was really thankful that I did that. So it was good.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't plan it. I wasn't necessarily planning. I had gone out of technology and had gone into the enterprise piece of the house, more on the business side. And I didn't think I was going to go back to cyber or technology again. And then the opportunity came up, and some of those things, they don't leave you a lot of time to think. It's like, okay, you got to tell me by tomorrow. So
right.
Here I am. But sometimes things happen, and you cannot completely plan your career 100%. Things are going to change throughout, and what you study not necessarily is going to be where you're going to end up working in the future. You just have to be flexible.
Exactly. And one of my women in cyber interviews, I interviewed someone from one of the top security companies in the world. And she was basically saying, men don't ever stop and think whether they're qualified or not for a position. They just go for it. And her advice was just go for it. Look for the opportunities, and when they come your way, take them, and you'll figure it out. There is I think her name is Maria Forleo. I listen to a lot of virtual mentorship, personal development. And I love it's all virtual podcasts now. And she says, everything is figure outable. And it absolutely is. I tell my kids that all the time. So I'll know how I'll have made a difference to them when they start saying that. So anyway, everything is figure outable. And,
no, that's very true.
Yeah. In the panel, we talked about the staffing, like the economic downturn and how that's impacted staffing. And one of the things that you talked about, which I thought was great, in fact, some people in the audience had said, hey, who are you looking for in terms of talent? Because now that there's everybody's work from home, it's given you a new perspective on where you can actually look for talent. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it actually was a shock for us because we were a pretty conservative bank where people come to the office, people, video. Actually, we had moved to a video platform probably a month before we had to go work from home. We were still on, maybe conference calls, etc., but people met face to face, and so having these made us realize that no, we can be as productive or even more in a work from home situation. And as a senior leadership team, we've been talking about, hey, now when we need to recruit, we don't necessarily have to relocate somebody or have that as a requirement. If we are looking for top talent and that top talent lives in the other side of the country, why not? We can plug them with a VDI or send them a laptop or whatever, and they can start working. So that gives us some flexibility and some actual testing of that model going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, there's definitely the human interaction is critical. And I think that we're actually all suffering a bit of fatigue from Zoom and working from home. It's not
Yeah.
just a temporary, I mean, it's a temporary situation, but it's a long-term temporary situation. I
Yeah.
know that with Excellion, we're taking it month by month, and it looks like my boss, who's a CEO, has always said, I want everybody in the office. I don't want people working from home. And now he's saying, you know what, I can see that people are more productive working from home, and he's going to give us the option now. And now we're taking it month by month because there are some people really wanting to come back to the office, but there's actually quite a few people that are going to want to continue working from home.
Yeah,
He's
to
more open
stay.
to that now.
Yes.
So that's really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you talk about we talked about mentorship programs and cybersecurity group you know uh, programs and things like that. So are there any in particular any groups that you can suggest specifically, or is it mostly just kind of the general groups that people should look for?
Yeah, I think in the States, in fact, today I was talking to a leader in cybersecurity that together with 7 other women form an alliance for women in cybersecurity through the state. And so I think you see them, she was mentioning that Ohio and other states are doing the same thing where you're seeing these that perhaps by state, you're seeing this spot of women in cybersecurity where before it was more women in technology in general. And probably we're all at some point have participated in those groups. Now they're more focused on also in partnership with those groups, but more focused on cybersecurity and bringing that pipeline. She actually showed me these statistics that 32%, we only have 32% of cybersecurity professionals in the nation are women, and that's actually pretty high. I think if you go to different states, it's going to be lower than that. But it's something that we need to aim for and we need to continue. Definitely, I'm now part of that group. And so our idea is to put mentors and mentees together and make sure that whether it is somebody in high school or in college or somebody that has left the workforce and decided to come back, to mentor them and try to get them the connections to get into the field. So yeah, I don't have a specific recommendation for an organization, but I would say that within the state that you're in, look for those groups and try to be active and participate in those groups.
Okay. And do you have any specific groups that you're in for the Latina group, or is it not specific to that?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually just recently talked to the We Are All Human campaign, and it's Hispanic Latino group started nationwide, and it tries to cover different socioeconomic factors of the Latino population, whether it is education or now with the pandemic, etc. So they have different groups around the nation that are part of this coalition. to support the Latino community. Also, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce as well, and helping the small businesses. That's always important. So whether it is the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or the African American Chamber of Commerce or the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, within each state, there are groups that will want cybersecurity professionals to be part of their group to also help their communities in their businesses that belong to that group. So yeah, active there, as well as now with the Women in Security Alliance in Michigan.
Okay. Good. Yeah, we just launched this new website, SeeSoStreet, which I'm repping here with the background, and it's a community for information. Well, it's a platform for information, education, and sharing for the CISO community, security executives, CISO community. And I think it would probably be good because we're going to be streaming the podcasts off the website and doing other events and webinars and thought leadership webinars and things like that. So I think we should find a spot on there for mentorship programs as references. So I think that's just kind of sparked my mind when you were saying that. That's a good thing.
That would be great.
So focusing a little bit more on the personal side. So I've never been to Troy, Michigan. My mom is from Michigan, and so I've been to Muskegon and Saginaw. And I used to live in Chicago, but I didn't get there too much as an adult. But I don't know Troy. So what's your favorite thing about Troy? And maybe a favorite restaurant, or what do you like living? What do you like living in Troy?
Yeah, if you are in the Midwest or you're a Michigander, you know that you always signal with the hand where you live.
Right.
So Troy is like around here, right?
Okay.
So we're north of Detroit. I think I don't live in Troy. I live in a smaller town north of Troy called Clarkston, part of the Oakland County, still Metro Detroit. We go to Detroit to hang out and to do concerts. I mean, the city had sort of a revival in the last 5 to 7 years, and lots of restaurants and nightlife. So it's really nice. We do have a place in up north Michigan, like over here.
Right. For those viewers, for those people listening to the audio, that's at the top of the fingers.
At the top of, yes, if you're doing on the audio, at the top of the finger, I'm signaling with my hand. But yes, in northern Michigan, it's beautiful. So I enjoy the lakes over there as well. Yeah.
Okay. And what do you
not
like
much to do in Troy, Michigan.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, hopefully when the pandemic is over and people can get back to some type of normalcy, then you can get back to Detroit and do the fun things that you like to do.
Yes.
Speaking of that, what do you like to do when you're not in CISO mode?
Well, CISO mode. Well, I have 3 kids that keep me very busy, and a husband. So we do activities with the kids, and they're all in different kind of sports, etc.
Okay, good. Well, you definitely all that keeps you definitely busy in terms of your added onto your full-time job as well. It looks like we might have a little bit of internet issues, and so welcome to the virtual world of these interviews. But so I'll just close up now and make that a wrap. So thank you so much for joining today. And this podcast will be on the iTunes and all the normal podcast platforms, and we'll also have a link to it off of SeeSoStreet. Okay, thank you very much.